ESG regulation. Introduction. About 2 decades ago, an obligation for companies, ESG reports, was introduced in the USA, issue more as a positive practice than as an obligation to report. The largest American companies accepted the challenge because there they formed the so-called rating agency that ranked the achievements of companies in improving the segments of environmental sustainability, work with human capital, and support of green projects and green economy. The main priority was for companies to make as good reports as possible to get better or cheaper credit from American banks. This story was also introduced throughout Europe, that is, European companies decided to advertise in this way. And everything was fine until the EU decided that by signing the Green Agreement, which was an improvement of the climate agreement, introduced an obligation for companies to have relevant reports. So, to combat climate change, the EU decided that it should introduce standardized sustainability reports. After long controversies, the EU standard was set and it is called European Sustainability Reporting Standards, ESRS. In this way, the recognizable ESG, or reporting in environmental, social and governance chapters, grew into ESRS. The European Union adopted a series of directives and opportunities that motivate citizens to unite in cooperatives. According to this directive, citizens have the right to form a profit or non-profit organization that will protect themselves from monopolies and will be able to invest in products that they can produce themselves, mostly in the energy segment. On the other hand, the EU also imposes an obligation on companies to have the so-called socially useful certificates with the program called European Sustainability Reporting Standards. In transition, European Standards for Sustainability, which aims to make companies socially responsibility, but at multiple levels, and directly corporate and help the community. That is to direct part of the profit to policy for a better life of a local community, investments in supplier companies or other segments for the development of the environment in which they work. This obligation is currently only for EU members and will start to apply from the beginning of next year, and within 4 years all companies will have to provide this report. As a motivation for faster fulfillment of obligations, the European Commission has determined mechanism for providing financial support for the development of certain segments in the company that will receive them on the basis of positive reports. Funds for the development of human resources, non-refundable financing for the development of the company and other benefits are maintained as advantageous aspirants for membership in the European Union. Will have to accept the no objective, but on only that. According to the information that can be obtained from the EU, the obligation for such report will also on the companies from the countries aspiring for EU membership that cooperated with European companies, because such cooperation will be a condition for obtaining a better rating of the companies when it is possible to use the benefit of European Union. Differences between ESG and SRS definition. What is ESG? ESG standards for environmental, social and governance. ESG investing refers to How companies score on these accountability metrics and standards for potential investments. Environmental criteria assess how a company protects the environment. Social criteria examine how it manages relationship with employees, suppliers, customers, and communities. Governance measures company leadership, executive pay, adults, internal controls, and stakeholders' rights. Definition of European Sustainability Reporting Standards. The standards cover the full range of environmental, social, and corporate governance issues, including climate change, biodiversity, and human rights. They provide investors with information to understand the sustainability impact of the companies in which they invest. Common standards are intended to help companies reduce reporting costs and prevent the use of voluntary standards, as is currently the case, as this creates problems with the quality of reporting. Only their unification will make public reporting of companies confidential. Conclusion. If we look at both definitions, we come to the conclusion that the EU wants transparency, truthfulness, and predictability in and from the company's reports. Unlike ESG obligation, which companies voluntarily report and do not have the obligation to solidly support, the EU not only requires solid support, but also requires full implementation and verification of veracity. History of ESG. The ESG term sometime after the First World War, but it appeared drastically in the 50s of the last century. Economist St. Howard Bowen argued that businesses should consider the impact of their operation on local cities and environments as an opportunity to avoid an overly myopic focus on dollars and cents. While that idea gained some traction in the 16th and 17th year as a responsibility thing to consider with its profitability, it was remanded in the 18th years by Edward Freeman and his book Strategic Management, a stakeholder approach cites until the 19th. Social responsibility existed, but it had limited success. There were no or few enforcement mechanisms. In the early 2000s, the United Nations synthesized the justice concerns of the international development community with concerns about corporate social responsibility. Its principles for responsibility investments announced new environmental, social, and governance criteria. With this synthesis came greater standardization of metrics and goals, although many of the criteria remain ambiguous. The codified framework has encouraged much wider adoption among NGOs, climate activities, social justice advocates, and government regulator and legislator around the world. Impact investment increased dramatically during the 2000s as well. The intellectual basis of the synthesis from which ESG emerged is stakeholders' capitalism, itself as outgrowth of other corporatist forms of governance, according to this thinking private, properly, and for-profit companies should be directed towards social goals. Many different groups, stakeholders, are considered to have a right to business activity and the use of private capital. Although this approach has an objective bent, it differs from socialism in key ways. Unlike socialism, stakeholders capitalism does not advocate the complete redistribution or abolition or private property. And unlike socialism, corporatism does not mean that the government makes all decisions about production and distribution. Price discovery, competition, and the allocation of private capital are still necessary part of a successful economy in this model. Stakeholder capitalism and its predecessor corporatism seek to use business to advance public in-depth political goals. Under true socialism, the US government would take over and run Twitter or Facebook or Google. In corporatism of stakeholder capitalism, companies are left in private hands, but the government directs their behavior and priority in key ways. By taking a corporatist or stakeholders approach rather than a socialist one, ESG leaders and new capitalism, movements such as Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum can make their agenda much more palatable in business schools and the investments community. They wrapped their ideas in financial language, innovation, risk reduction, added value, profitability, and fiduciary duty. Browsing the website of ESG organization gives the impression that ESG is a cutting-edge technologically sophisticated with investment strategy and paid to increased profitability. Their approach attracts business leaders and funders who see an opportunity to expand their influence and increase their economic return by early adoption of ESG criteria, thereby helping to decide the direction ESG takes in the policy realm. A final important element in the evolution of ESG is the increasing backlash it faces politically, economically, and socially. Even widely center-left elites began to criticize her excesses. State and local governments in the US have begun to pass laws and change policy to reduce the reach of ESG in public pensions and municipal finance. In 2021, Texas banned certain major finance firms that have reduced or severed trace to fossil fuel from doing business with state agency and municipality. Half of the states have steered billions of pension dollars away from BlackRock because of its ESG advocacy. Despite the blackish, ESG criteria will likely continue to permanent the global economy at every level. Although BlackRock founder and CEO Larry Fink has stepped back from using the term ESG because of its increasingly negative connotation, he says he hasn't changed his stance on any ESG issue. This trend is likely to continue. Too many organizations and advocates have staked their careers on it to turn back or change course now. History of European Sustainability Reporting Standards. The European Union, after the Green Agreement, handed the obligation of the companies for greater activity and proactivity with their fulfillment of the ESG criteria primarily by introducing a series of certified ISO standards that were needed for the function of the companies. 31 July 2023, the European Commission adopted the first set of European sustainability standards. Developed by the European Financial Reporting Advisory Group, EFRAG, the standards are now sustainability for all companies subject to the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD. They guide business on what to report on in relation to environmental, social and governance, ESG topics, and are bullet on the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD. In June 2024, EFRAG published significant updates to their SRS questions and answers. This included 44 new technical clarification, bringing the total to 68, addressing common and complex issues raised by stakeholders regarding SRS implementation. This is part of EFRAG's ongoing efforts to make it easier for organizations to navigate SRS requirements. The new explanations are designed to help stakeholders better understand the SRS framework, focusing on practical implementation issues. They are organized to reflect disclosure requirements and are searchable via new introduced K-term index, making it easier for users to find specific guidelines related to their needs. What is CSRD? Building on the foundation of the Non-Financial Reporting Directive, NFRD, CSRD was developed to provide better transparency regarding the sustainability impacts of business and give stakeholders a better understanding of company activities. While the NFRD covers around 11,000 large companies across the EU, the CSRD has extended this scope to almost 5,000 businesses, including all large and publicly listed companies, even listed SMEs. The broader scope and inclusiveness of CSRD reflects the growing recognition of the role that business play in addressing global sustainability challenges. It signals a shift to a business environmental where transparency, accountability and proactive engagement in sustainability are no longer just nice to haves, but non-negotiable aspects of doing business. For business understanding, CSRD and ESRS matters is much more than just regulatory compliance and penalty avoidance. It is also a great opportunity to increase your brand's appeal to customers and investors, strengthen your company's reputation and support global sustainability goals. History and development of European Sustainability Reporting Standard adopted by the EU in 2014, the journey towards the SRS began with the NFRD. This directive was the EU's first major step in requiring a large company to report on their environmental and social impacts. However, over time, if it becomes clear that the NFRD suffered from several shortcomings. This prompted the European Commission to review the directive in 2019 and issue a consultation to get stakeholders' feedback on potential amendments. On 21st January 2021, the consultation published the NFRD implementation assessment, which outlined the gaps to be addressed. Non-financial information lacks comparability and reliability. Overlapping legislation causes confusion in reporting and additional cost. High demand for common reporting standards, digitalization, and striker adults. The need for companies to disclose materiality assessment process. Proposing uniform transparency through the disclosure of management reports. Advised NFRD to expand to cover all listed and private companies with increased requirement for small and medium companies. Around the same time, the European Commission also sought advice from EU financial authorities EBA, EIOPA and ESMA on KPIs and methodologies to link NFRD reporting with EU taxonomy rules. It also asked EFRAG to develop a proposal for sustainability reporting standards for EU companies. Now, for its role in advising on EU financial matters, she was tasked by the European Commission to develop the European Sustainability Reporting Standard. Replacement of NFRD with SRS on 20 April 2021, the European Commission proposed that the CSRD address the limitation mentioned above. It aimed to expand the scope of sustainability reporting to more companies and increase the level of detail and comparability reported information. The SRS was developed to provide a concrete framework for the reporting requirements outlined in the CSRD. These standards were designed to replace the general and somewhat ambitious NFRD guidelines with a clear set of sustainability reporting standards in Europe. To ensure that the standards address the needs of all relevant parties, EFRAG, established in 2001, which is a private company, consulted with various stakeholders, including businesses, investors, and civil society organizations. He then presents the draft standard that were subjected to a public consultation process that allowed for feedback and refinement. On July 31, 2023, the European Commission adopted the final set of standards, marking a huge milestone for corporate sustainability reporting in Europe. EFRAG will continue to develop and refine the European sustainability reporting standards to ensure the standards remain relevant and objective. On 20 April 2021, the European Commission proposed that the CSRD address the limitation mentioned above. It aimed to expand the scope of sustainability reporting to more companies and increase the level of detail and comparability of report information. The European Sustainability Reporting Standards was developed to provide a concrete framework for the reporting requirements outlined in the CSRD. This standard was designed to replace the general and somewhat ambitious NFRD guidelines with a clear set of sustainability reporting standards of Europe. Obligation of companies. According to the new obligation, as can be read above, SRS has already become applicable and binding for EU companies. They will have to apply it and give notice to more than 500 parties every year. However, this obligation is a cost, but according to history and purpose, the idea is for companies to have real notification. Futures. Starting from the climate agreement, if we take into account the position of the ESG on his historical development on the one hand and on the other hand the position of the European Union, in this context the European Commission, then we can come to the conclusion that now the European Sustainability Reporting Standards opens up a lot of opportunities. Somewhere, the two directives of guidelines overlap by opening opportunities for business cooperation and business models. First of all, the obligation in the area of the green and circular economy. Penalties and awards. According to ESRS, companies have rewards and penalties for non-compliance. Although for the time being it is not explicitly state how the companies will be punished, it appears that it will be with the CO2 tax. On the other hand, banks are currently working on a new so-called ESMA recommendation, a climate questionnaire that will be an obligation for all companies that will request a green credit to fill in and answer it. But they will also have to practice the undertaking obligation to get verification from the banks of independent auditors that they adhere to the plan and to have the tax or liability that they would have to pay be reduced.